keep. You got pen. Okay, are we there?
Maybe. I'm trying to find out. Do you have the transition to being on YouTube? Because it's not on a show.
Sorry. From Marcus.
What sound are you using? You haven't got the microphone.
None of the microphones.
They all
Right.
broken.
Transition to being on YouTube account.
Yeah.
I've tried that and transition to being on now. I'm assuming that's
Where's Marcus? Marcus? Can we... We're just setting the transition to YouTube. We need that.
Well, no, I need. No, I mean that might. I'm googling transition to being on.
We're streaming, so we need to check the stream.
I know what we can do. It's alright.
So you should be able to do the frame.
Yes, that would be sensible, wouldn't it?
Bit.ly, TCN YouTube.
Okay, we should be able to get to it from here.
Okay.
You typing it in or?
I was going to, but I thought you said you just got a way to get to it, so. Right.
www.
Right, https :
Oh, I've got to do the. Okay, https.
No, Dad.
HTTP. Hypertext Transfer Protocol.
HTTP.
Colon // HTTPS, did you say?
Yep. / youtube.com.
/ www. .ly
7
/
K
TC
4 Juliet Oscar Llama
.com.
Charlie question mark.
So that we should go.
Equals share.
Okay. You've shared that one.
I don't have internet. Why do I not have internet?
Okay.
Can you sit at the computer? Nothing through.
Should we set it to
Fails to
record?
switch to record.
Okay.
Share it with.
Set that up. Okay.
Start streaming, start recording.
Good evening, everyone. Sorry about the late start. You'll know exactly what I'm going to say. Technical issues. Seems to be the curse of any sort of organised talk. Tonight will be very informal. There's teas and coffees and cakes. Up there. If you feel the need for refreshments during the talk, then by all means go and grab something. But let's do the introductions. So, my name's Jeff Coleman, and 5 years ago we had a similar evening at what was then considered to be the beginning of the climate emergency discussions in Chipping Norton. Now, at that particular meeting, I think we had about 130 people. Things have moved on quite a bit since then, and we thought it was a good opportunity to have some further discussion, and who better to bring in than this gentleman to my right, Pete Sudbury, who is not only something of an expert on climate and climate change, climate emergency, he's also a counsellor as well. So he's used to fielding challenging questions. So if you're one of the people in the room who is unsure about the arguments of climate change, or you're someone who disagrees, then don't be silent. There will be an opportunity later on for questions. After the talk, there will also be an opportunity for us to have a group discussion as well. So I'm going to shut up because you're not here to hear me speak, and I think we should give Pete a bit of a Chipping Norton welcome.
Good evening. Thank you very much for that. Okay, so how do I move the slides?
So, that can go into the background, and what we actually we want that. Hold on.
It's still up there, I can't see it now.
Okay, so that is on the slide, so that goes forward, that goes back.
Okay.
So right and left arrows, but you want to be able to see the presentation.
It would be
Very useful.
slightly easier. I can always look round.
Okay, so that should now show you exactly, and you can use those
Yeah. Which
to go forward and back, and you can.
Okay, so that's the title. That's what we're talking about. Excuse me, I've just got a background removal update available. Tell you what, on computers are amazing. They know exactly when you want the update, don't they? Exactly when you want it. Oh yes, now.
Where you don't
Right.
want to update.
So. Okay. I'm pressing all the right buttons. I'll try these ones. This is not working.
Okay. Probably means the mouse has come back onto that. It has. So if I move that
Shoot
to
the
there,
mouse. We need a cat.
you can see that's now on the correct screen.
Right.
So right and left arrows, or
Right.
that one.
Okay, fine. This slide wasn't made by me, it was made by someone with a black belt in PowerPoint, so I'm afraid it's the most professional slide in the deck by quite a way. Oh, God. Help. Escape.
I'm going to sit over here because then I can jump.
God. Help. No, that's not working. This has just gone back onto the slideshow.
Going to view slideshow.
Well, is there a view slideshow in this edition?
It's on slideshow now.
Yeah, and then which buttons do I press?
So from
Foot forward, fine.
that will go forward,
Got it.
and the left will go back.
Right. Okay. So I start off. I can't actually read my own slide. It's interesting. So the other thing about PowerPoint is it never survives contact with a new machine. So whatever happens, the formatting goes. So I read natural science in Cambridge, and then I did medicine in Oxford, and then I became a psychiatrist. I thought the most interesting thing about people was what went on between their ears, and I did that for, well, actually, it doesn't leave you. It's like a stick of rock. It goes right the way through to the end. I did my membership, got my consultant job. Just after I finished, or just as I was finishing a 3-year MBA at Oxford Brookes, I then spent a long time in leadership positions in the NHS as a clinical director and then a medical director, and I was at board level for 12 years. I did some work with the National Clinical Advisory Team, and I had an interest right from my MBA time with what I thought IT could really make a difference to healthcare. I still do, and it still hasn't. And I did some work with the National Programme for IT, which you may remember. It was a perfect. I was learning. Really, what I learned was how not to run a program. It was perfectly configured to make sure it failed. And I ran in my last trust. We did the first full IT outsourcing in the NHS. That also went wrong, and I had the broken the thing that didn't work on my laptop. And every time it went wrong, I sent a screenshot to Hewlett Packard, who were doing the job. And eventually they fixed it. So they thought I was brilliant. My boss decided she didn't like innovators. So she sent me on a secondment, and then I worked for Hewlett Packard for 3 years as their health insider. I then got into a project in Scotland, doing silver pasture, running pigs in trees. If you put animals, if you rear animals in woodlands, the animals fertilise the trees go faster, the trees shelter the animals, and the animals are more healthy. And then after that, really rather by accident, I went to Extinction Rebellion, and then I joined a sustainability group, and someone one day said, have you ever thought about being a councillor? I said no. They said, would you try it? I said yes. 5 weeks later I was elected, in a by-election, and then 18 months later fought it again, and I've been on the cabinet ever since, and I've been doing climate change, environment, and recently added future generations to that.
Sorry, can I just ask, it's quite a drastic change from career, because you said you started out as a psychiatrist.
Yeah.
What caused you to make that big change?
Oh, I got to retire.
Okay.
I got to retire at 55, because when I was a young psychiatrist, the psychiatrists could retire young, and I retired, and actually my last boss threw me out as well, so I thought it was time I moved on. And there is something about the current situation that I think makes quotes from Churchill very, very good. We do have a problem, and sometimes you just have to make sure you do not give in. And Rupert Read, a great fan of his, and these two lovely quotes. You can't bargain with the atmosphere. I remember hearing him say that on telly when Extinction Rebellion were out. And we're sending our children to an unknown planet, which is sobering but true. And more recently, you've seen in May, The Guardian interviewed a lot of IPCC scientists who told them a lot of fairly despairing things. And more recently, those famous climate radicals, the UK government actuaries, working with Exeter University, published a paper on climate scorpion, and they had 5 conclusions. Global warming's accelerating, the impacts are more severe, we're going to overshoot 1.5, the climate may be more reactive than we thought, and we're increasing risk of triggering climate tipping points, which is which they're actually, so they do things like assessing you for life insurance. If you had those for life insurance, they probably wouldn't insure you, would they? So my big question, right from the beginning of my tenure as cabinet member, I've said that the important question is to ask what would we do if climate and biodiversity really was an emergency, and not what would it be easy to do, what would it be convenient to do, what would it even be possible to do, what is necessary to do. And if what's necessary to do turns out to be impossible, then we better redefine impossible, because the alternative is just not worth contemplating. And that's actually, it's interesting, people find that quite liberating. You don't have to think, oh, how will the organisation do this? You just say, we need to do this, and then we need to work with, my job is to work with the organisation to make sure it can do it. So, the first thing I want to go through is some of the science and how much trouble we're in. Liam Fox is not noted as a climate keen person, but in fact at Innovation Zero last year, this is what he said. He opened it by saying the science is really dire, and we need rapid cuts to emissions, and we need to get 3 trillion a year into the transition as soon as possible. And when someone like Liam Fox says that, I like quoting Conservatives, because the people who tend to object to this are Conservatives. And actually, often when Conservatives get it, they really are very good. And this is Johan Rockström, who is an amazing climate scientist. Absolutely, he actually works on climate impacts at the Potsdam Institute, and he says, where we're heading toward 2.5, 2.6, 2.7, the Earth hasn't been there for 4 million years. Human beings date back 300,000. So human beings have never been where we're heading towards, where we're heading for. And there's no evidence whatsoever, he said, that humans can survive 2.5 degrees of warming. No evidence whatsoever that our society and civilization can survive that. Lord Deben, another brilliant Conservative, if you ever get a chance to hear him speak, he's absolutely spellbinding. He's a superb speaker. We should act like this is a war footing, we should get on a war footing because it's going to act like a war. And then below that, there are 2 very recent economics papers. One of them looking at, saying, the one on the left, that by the end of the century, the magnitude of the climate impacts will be, economic will be the same as fighting a war the whole time. It's got a time on it, isn't it? And the one on the right, actually, they looked at committed damages. That means even if you went to net zero tomorrow, to zero emissions tomorrow, the damages that would occur by 2050, and by 2050 they're saying $38 trillion a year damages. To orientate you, current global GDP is about 100 trillion. They're assuming it'll be 150 by then. So that's 20% of GDP by then, minimum. And they calculate the social cost of carbon. That's the price carbon ought to have on it, $1,000 a tonne. So the damage that carbon's doing is $1,000 a tonne. The damage carbon dioxide is doing is $1,000 a tonne. Of course, the price in carbon markets is 50. AR6, the 6th report of the IPCC, the synthesis came out in 2023, and that phrase, that choices and actions we do in this decade will have impacts now for thousands of years. That's a hell of a responsibility. As Barack Obama says, we're the first generation to understand what's going on, and the last generation with the chance to stop it. And we need rapid and deep cuts between 2020 and the latest before 2025. We are still before 2025, so it's not all lost. And big cuts by 2030. Big cuts. Meanwhile, on the right, you've got just a nice, it's a useful diagram of this size. The pink is how much above the previous record sea surface temperatures in between 60 south and 60 north have been for the last year. Okay, that's a rolling year. And that's about 0.2, 0.3 degrees. Actually, Michael Mann points out that that's not that askew from the last El Nino. In fact, you'd expect in 10 years you'd expect something 1.8 to 2.8 degrees of warming. And so it's not that askew. Similarly, the land temperatures have been up and they've stayed up. They're staying up still at the moment. The critical point is probably around, if they stay over, if they get back into the pack by about June, July, then it was just an El Nino and some funny things, but they don't look like they're going to do that. And in fact, the other thing is, North Atlantic sea surface temperatures, it looks the same, but that's 0.7 of a degree up from the previous record. And it's not, and again, it's now around the levels that people a year ago were shouting about being records. So there's something going on in the North Atlantic, and you may have heard that the theory is that taking sulphur out of shipping fuels is what's done it, and I'll come to that in a minute. I'll skip those actually because they're too small. I put this up because it's just lovely, and I was amazed it translated into a slide. This is looking at all the deep water, the ocean currents around the world, and I can't. I'm going to. So, and up here is the AMOC, the Atlantic Meridian overturning circulation, which is why everyone calls it AMOC. That there is the subpolar gyre. And there are warning signs that particularly that may be about to collapse. And the way it works, there are two places. So here, warm water comes up from the tropics and it evaporates and it gets more and more salty. When it gets to here, it cools down and it's very salty. And if you look at the bottom, it shows you the key. It weighs a lot more. So down here it's a ton 2 kilos per cubic metre. And up there at the most salty it's actually 1,028. So it's actually a lot heavier. And that weight, it means it sinks. And the water sinking there, the cold water sinking, drags, is the engine. It's the engine that drives it. And that is slowing down. And what that means is that there is what Michael Mann has called a cold block here, because the warm water isn't coming in as fast, so it's cooling down. So the only place on the Earth that is cooler than it was 100 years ago is there, the cold block. And that has possible impacts now, because when there's a cold blob, there tends to be a low pressure stuck there, and that forces the jet stream into a particular configuration, which means that we get what we've been getting, which is wet and lots of it. And in southern Europe, they get droughts. And southern Europe's the droughts have been increasing in frequency and severity faster than anywhere else in the world. So right now, it's having an impact on our weather systems. And the bad news is, with the North Atlantic being hotter and that being stuck more, the likelihood is that this kind of continual rain is going to become a very common part of being. I mean, it used to be a part of being British that it rains all the time, isn't it? But it just rains more now. So that may explain the rather odd weather we've been having. And the medical profession has got the picture. This was published in the BMJ, the Lancet, and 300 other medical journals simultaneously. The climate and nature crisis are one indivisible global health emergency. Yeah, that health is really at risk because of climate change. On the other hand, Chris Skidmore, another Conservative, has left the Conservative Party now because they wanted to drill for more oil, but who really got it. And he wrote Mission Zero, don't know if anyone's read it, is it is a brilliant neoliberal framing of net zero. Frames it in terms of an economic opportunity not to be missed. He calls it the greatest economic opportunity since the Industrial Revolution. So, we haven't got any sound. That's a shame. So this is God from Monty Python, the Holy Grail, and he's saying, "Get on with it!" Okay, we haven't got any sound, so that's a shame. So trajectories, I'm going to stand up and do this. So this is a carbon brief graph, but it's it puts the International Energy Agency stuff in mind. So this is historical emissions. This is where you need to be for 1.5. This is where, if everybody did what they pledged in 2023, so COP 28, we'd be there. So far, we've got 21, 22, 23. So that's where policy is now. And clearly we need to drag policies down to pledges, and then we need to drag pledges down into the 1.5 trajectory, because every year you delay it. And that is an example of how you would do that, what you need to do with electric vehicle sales. And actually, although there has been an awful lot of negative propaganda about electric vehicles to try and prevent people from buying them from people who don't want this to work, electric vehicles are following that trajectory. And the place that's driving them, the world leader in solar, in batteries and EVs, is China. The Chinese government 10 years ago said, we want to be the leaders in this, and they went for it. 10 years ago, George Osborne smashed the British lead in climate tech, systematically dismantled everything the previous administration had done. Good. I just thought I'd put in some good news. Climate sensitivity is a theoretical construct. It's a construct. What would happen if you doubled CO2 tomorrow? What would the short-term equilibrium within five years be? How much would the temperature go up? That's quite important, because if it's 6 degrees, then it's worse than if it's 3. And over time, these are two IPCC reports, and that one had the most probable value of 3.1 and a range between 4.1 and 2.6. That one went down to 3 with a slightly wider range. And then the most recent one, very recently, came out with 2.9. And if you want to sound smart in climate circles, what you say is, I gather the problem is modelling clouds. Okay, it's really simple, just say that. And everything, well, you're really big, because the problem is modelling. Clouds are really hard work, but clouds reflect. And so what the people did, and the only way you can work out climate sensitivity is to look at the paleo record. You look at the record of ice ages, and you work out what the temperature was then, you look at what the CO2 was then, you take into account all the other things that are going on, and you come up with a number.
How do they check the temperature?
You'd have to ask a paleo scientist. There are, it's ratio of oxygen isotopes. There are
Ice cores.
Well, ice cores, and then they get the ratio of oxygen isotopes. I think is one of the ways they do it. It is a.
Is it accurate, or is it a margin
Yes,
error?
there are a whole series of things that they triangulate, but it's a very sound piece of science now. There's a lot of work has gone into it, because it's dead important. It's also very interesting trying to recreate, trying to understand what happened in the past. So you can find the speed of currents, you can find the temperature of seawater by what grows on. I really don't understand it. I have read about it, but it's not.
Because I know, for example, carbon dating is only really accurate about 50,000 years or so.
We can recommend some websites that address these questions. They're good questions,
Yeah.
and there's some answers. The best thing is to look at some websites that explain it by scientists involved and so on.
Yeah.
long story short, there's a lot of work gone on this, a lot of scrutiny.
And a lot of, I'm taking the view here that I'm talking about the science. I don't understand it. There is no one in the world who understands every bit of the science, simply because it's such a broad field. So you have to assume that the people who are recognised experts in their field do know what they're talking about. Like you recognise if you get on an aeroplane that the pilot is an expert in flying it. You know, if you really have spent your life doing it and you're qualified in it, you probably know what you're doing. And this is 2023 is the warmest year on record that we know. There are quite a lot of things that say that heating is accelerated, and this is one of them. So ocean heat uptake, you can draw a straight line from it, a dotted line. I drew these two lines because there is a clear reflection point in that if you've done any graphing. And similarly, in fact, this is NASA, and again, there's a reflection point somewhere around here, around the 2010 to 2015 mark. Right, now, a year ago, there was an awful lot of fighting about this bit of science, but this bar chart is from the latest IPCC report, and what it does, it's a bridge chart. There's net warming, and these are all the things on the left that make the temperature go up, and these are the things that make it go down. So there's carbon dioxide, methane, nitric oxide, H gases, volatile organic carbons, contrails, black carbon, organic carbon, and so on. The whiskers give you an idea of the accuracy of the estimate. So they give between the 5th and the 95th percentile. So all of these are statistical. And on the way down, land use, NOx, and this one, sulfur dioxide. Sulfur dioxide is... James Hansen makes the point that actually no one's done the work to measure directly what sulfur dioxide does. It's a balancing item. You put it there because you know what the temperature is, you know what all these do, and you say, that's roughly what it does. James Hansen certainly thinks that actually that's underestimated because we've underestimated the amount of warming that's happened from the last ice age. Sulfur dioxide is a short-lived aerosol. The way you get it is you get it by burning sulfur-rich fossil fuels, coal or shipping oil. And one of the things that's happened in the last 5 years is 2015, but mostly 2020, the global shipping industry agreed that they would take sulfur dioxide out of the fuel that they use, either by using scrubbers or by using cleaner fuel. Because when a large ship sails 50 miles off the eastern seaboard in the US and the wind's in the right direction, you actually see a statistically significant increase in admissions to hospital with asthma and COPD. That's how much sulfur dioxide they put out. Okay, and so to avoid pollution, sulfur dioxide is the stuff that made acid rain too. And in China, they've been putting scrubbers in the flues because they've been worried about acid rain. But of course, the first impact is while the sulfur dioxide stays there, you're masking some of the effect of burning the fossil fuels. The carbon dioxide sticks around for 1,000 years. This is gone in a year. And so things get much worse. As you stop using fossil fuels, the temperature goes up. And in China, actually, where they've scrubbed started scrubbing sulfur dioxide out of their fluids, the land temperature has gone up very sharply. And that is probably why the North Atlantic is really hot, because the big shipping lanes are across the North Atlantic and the North Pacific. And what you could see in the past, you actually see when a ship went past, because what sulfur dioxide does is it does two things. One is it helps cloud formation, so clouds form, and it makes clouds whiter, so they reflect more light. And the more light you reflect, the cooler things are. And so, and actually everybody now agrees that what we are likely to see is an accelerated warming. That's not awful. It just means that if the death zone is 2 to 2.5 degrees, you're hitting that. You're already well in that by 2050, and you're getting into it by 2040. So everything's brought forward 10 years just by that acceleration. And given that, I guess if you put a finger in the wind, you'd say we're 10 years late reacting to all this. That's not great news, and it's something we just have to live with and deal with. These are the things that really worry you. So, biological systems, actually Earth systems, are not linear, don't respond in a linear way. If I take one of you and you've got a temperature of 1 degree above normal, you'll feel a bit meh. If it's 2 degrees, you'll probably feel really, really awful. If it's 3 degrees, you will be absolutely flat, and if it's 4 degrees, you'll be dead. And so that is a very non-linear response, and the climate is the same. There are things that it's a bit like biodiversity loss. Biodiversity loss has been compared to taking rivets out randomly out the wing of an aeroplane. Nothing appears to happen for a very long time, and then it goes bang. It's the same here. You can push the Amazon rainforest to a certain extent, and then suddenly it goes into a self-reinforcing. There's a temporary intermission. While we're here, questions so far? I'm just getting into solutions, so there are some solutions.
I want the solution.
Yeah, I want the solutions too. Yeah, because it's all very well staring down the barrels of a gun. You want to know what to shoot back with, don't you?
Sorry, we had it plugged in earlier. There, I put it over on the...
So it's interesting that the staff survey in Oxford County Council had the climate team had really quite high levels of stress. I checked, it wasn't me, and it isn't me. And it's just that actually if you work all night staring at this stuff all the time, it is quite stressful.
There was a question.
Yes, question.
Thank you for the talk. The AMOC, is that what we know as the Gulf Stream? Or what's the difference?
No, I think the Gulf Stream is the bit that's blown by the wind,
Yeah.
and the AMOC is the bit that's driven by water sinking.
Right.
So they are slightly different.
So the Gulf Stream is kind of weather event.
No, the government, I think it's the trade winds, isn't it?
Gulf Stream is the local manifestation of the overall phenomena, which is the AMOC.
But there is more to it as well.
There's lots of things involved. It's a whole coupled system. What matters for us is that the Gulf Stream and the AMOC are part of the same phenomenon, and they're driven by the same things, and we need the same solutions to tackle the problem of it. That's what matters for us.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah. And the model suggests that we will have wetter.
Cooler and dry.
Cooler and dry.
Much colder and dry.
And dry.
But it's wetter now.
Well, it's wetter now with the cold blob. So the cold blob, which is the precursor for the fact, jams the jet stream in a particular wheel that means that we get wet and southern Europe gets extremely dry.
Is it okay to point out that the real problems are not the ones that we will face? It's still the majority of the world's population in the tropical latitudes are going to face.
Yeah,
they're
so
going to really get hammered.
By and large, the people who really suffer are the ones who A, emit the least now, and B, historically have emitted the least.
And that will bite us as well.
Yeah, at some point, we can't just sit back and say, well, tough luck reasons.
If they've got nowhere to live.
So there's the overdraft. Right, so Jared Diamond actually said, remember the subtitle of the book, which was How Civilizations Choose to Succeed or Fail? Because he says that actually it's not what happens to you, it's how you respond to it that makes the difference. And he says two things. You have to have long-term thinking, and you make anticipatory decisions. So you make decisions before the crisis hits you. And that's especially bad if you have an elite with short-term interests that conflict with the long-term interests of society. That sounds, unfortunately, ghastly familiar. The other problem is that, of course, thinking about people in the future don't have any voice now, and most of the impacts are in the future. And the other thing is your willingness to reconsider core values, taking painful decisions. This is an amazing story. The Norse settled Greenland in the medieval warm period, which is colder than now but warmer than the periods around it. And they had utter contempt for the Inuit who lived around them, and they didn't like goats, which can eat most things. They don't like cow and sheep. They kept cows, which is really hard in marginal places. And they didn't eat fish, and they starved to death rather than eating fish. Around them, the Inuit were thriving on seals and fish, and the Norse starved all of them. 2 settlements, they all starved because they wouldn't eat fish. And that is an example of a core value. The Norse were quite stubborn, I think. So, Guy Harrington from KPMG reviewed Limits to Growth in 2020 and found that it had been uncannily accurate in predicting all the things that it predicted, and that we were somewhere between business as usual and comprehensive technology, so we were not really okay. And she said that actually we consciously need to let go of the idea of growth as an objective, and instead we need to move to resource efficiency, pollution abatement, health and education. And you look at those 3 and you think, maybe it's just me, but that would be quite a nice world. Waste not, want not, no pollution, and health and education. Healthy, happy people. You think, why wouldn't we do that? And there is a fetish with growth. And the link that I can trigger, if you look up, Bobby Kennedy made a speech in which he talked about GDP. He says GDP measures napalm and nuclear weapons, it measures armoured cars to fight riots on our streets, it measures locks, and the cost of locks and the prisons for the people who break them. And it doesn't measure the happiness of our children or the quality of their education, the honesty of our politicians. And then he says, in short, it measures everything except all those things that make life worthwhile, and tells us everything about America except why we're proud to be American. It is a devastating speech. It's only about a paragraph long, but it is a devastating indictment of the fixation with GDP. And we know, actually, in the UK, GDP's gone up, doubled in 30 years. But actually, most people are no better off because the money's been siphoned off by a very small number of people. And we know the solutions. These are the solutions: donut economics, circular economy, risk management. I'm nearly finished now. So, rocks and diagrams, this green bit, that's the safer operating space. What Kate Raworth, put inside the social foundation. So it's all very well being within limits, but actually you don't want people socially in a socially unsustainable thing suffering from poverty and need. So you need to meet everyone's basic needs, but you need to keep under the environmental ceiling. And you need to design an economy to do that. And there is a whole, Kay Raworth has written essentially a whole handbook on how you do this and modelled it. And there are cities and districts and so on really following this, and we're trying to adopt that in Oxford County Council and work with the local enterprise partnership on how you would actually do that in a real economy. And then the circular economy. It is interesting talking to some of the older, actually often the older conservatives on some of our groups, our sustainability groups. They say it is a modern problem that you take, make, break waste. They say, I can remember my mum mending things, and my grandma used to mend everything. Actually, and there was a guy who lived on St Helena for 6 months, for 2 years. He said everything there is recycled and mended because the boat doesn't come for 6 months. There's only one boat every 6 months. He also lived in Ghana or somewhere, And he said there, when people are finished with the tin, they sell it. You empty the tin and you sell the tin can, and everything is reused and everything is reworked. And it is only in our society where it's okay to take stuff and bust it and throw it away. And that's offensive and egregious anyway, so we should stop it. But also it is necessary. It is necessary to do that. Because in the last 5 years, we extracted more from this planet than we did in the whole of the last century. And if anybody thinks that's sustainable, they need their head examined. 3% growth is doubling every 30 years. You cannot double extraction. Nobody can tell me you can double extraction every 30 years. And then here it is. So we manufacture, refurbishing, recycling, all the things that you can do that don't involve breaking it. And you design out. BMW, it's called the car project. They are building a prototype car of which every single bit is reusable, remanufacturable, recyclable. Nothing will be thrown away. You will take it when it's finished. They also design cars that will last 50 years. And when it's finished, you can take every bit and you can rework it. You just take out waste. It is possible to do that. And vitally necessary. And then it's risk management. When we started working on adaptation in Oxfordshire County Council, I felt a lot more comfortable. I spent my lifetime in healthcare. It's about risk management. You can do that. We can do that. And it is horizon scanning, threat impact assessment. Minimise it before it happens, manage it when it does, recover from it, and then add resilience, and then do the whole thing again and keep on doing that. And right now we're working, we've brought out a pack for councils on how to do adaptation, the initial work on adaptation. We need to work with, I think there are 6 things that you need to keep going. You need power, you need water, you need food and agriculture, you need safe shelter, you need transport and logistics, you need ICT. If you've got all of them, you're fine. If you lose any one of those, things begin to go wrong in periods ranging from an hour to a few weeks. Okay? And those we need to look at them, we need to manage them, we need to make sure that we've built in resilience. Because at some point the sort of storms that are hitting people are going to hit us. We are going to get clobbered by big storms, and we're going to get clobbered by enormous floods and so on. And we need to run risk registers. Anyone who's worked in a reasonably sized business and knows about risk registers. And what's the risk? Okay, put it on. We've got climate change as our top risk, corporate risk at OCC. And we need to remember that not just local impacts, there's remote ones. When you see a massive flood somewhere, that's not just somebody's house going, somebody's business, someone's life, someone's livelihood, someone's future. It's actually someone else's supply chain being smashed to pieces. Someone else can't get the bits that they needed. And this is what our local resilience forum has put us on list. That was the stuff that the World Economic Forum did. Negative emissions. So at some point we need to put the carbon back where the carbon belongs. And we need to start that now. We need to start that now because it's a moral duty. We need to start that now because otherwise we need to generate the demand pool that builds the supply chains that start to scale up to gigaton levels. And direct air capture, cloud treatment, enhanced ocean productivity, enhanced weathering, blue carbon, afforestation, bioenergy with carbon capture and storage, building with biomass, biochar, soil carbon and sequestration. Those are the ones that Carbon Brief had. Each of those has its own problems, either limited capacity or crippling expense. At the moment it is, some company was boasting that they could take a ton of carbon dioxide out of the air with only 750 kilowatt hours of energy. 750 kilowatts is an awful lot of energy for 1 ton. And in fact, the extreme models of direct air capture mean you need to add another third to global generating capacity to do it. Again, when you're poor at the end of the century. ourselves. I'm going to brag here. So, Future Forest Company I helped set up, and I also founded and invested in Undo Climate, which is the world's largest enhanced weathering company. Enhanced weathering is we crush up silicate rocks, you spread them on farmland. They're actually great for the soil. They alkalinize it, and it absorbs CO2 as it weathers. That's the way CO2 is normally removed from the atmosphere. So when the Himalayas suddenly were building fast, there was an ice age because an awful lot of rock weathered and took out CO2, and CO2 levels dropped. So that's the way. That's the traditional way the Earth removes it, and we can accelerate that by grinding the rock and sort of spreading it. And the other thing that I'm interested in is biochar, which we did look at while we were looking at this, and Man decided to focus on enhanced weathering. Enhanced weathering is a gigaton solution. You could do probably 4 or 5 gigatons. You might do 4 or 5 with biochar. Biochar was discovered by many people, but it was particularly used by the pre-Columbian societies in the Amazon. If you burn biomass in a low oxygen environment, you get a crystalline form of carbon that is really great. It's got massive surface area. It absorbs water. It holds nutrients. And so you have the terra preta in the Amazon, which are rich black soils, and they're still rich now because the carbon stays there for hundreds of years. So that again is a gigaton solution. And it's attractive for us as a county council because we have hundreds of thousands of trees, many of which are ashes dying, but also that need pruning all the time, and that's a lot of biomass. And if you turn that into biochar, then you can start to draw the carbon. And under you can subscribe to. And finally, this is my ecosystem. This is the way I think of it. Just Oxfordshire County Council. I think these 3 are important. Adaptation, mitigation. So adaptation is surviving. Mitigation is trying to stop climate change. And restitution is putting the carbon back where it belongs. And up here, we've got the future generations. And we have public health and emergency planning. So really interesting. So things that were individual departments start to coalesce around this. You get the public health department, the emergency planning department, the lead local flood authority, and then we've got sustainable urban drainage and natural flood management, and we are responsible for the local mayor nature recovery strategy, which in turn helps us with planetary boundaries. We've got circular economy and donut economics. We now run the local enterprise partnership. We're in charge of that. So again, you can drive those into something that does have an influence on business. We have PASCO is the Pathways to Zero Carbon Oxfordshire. It's written by the Environmental Change Institute. It is the most comprehensive plan ever to decarbonise a county, and we are following that. And we've got Zero Carbon Oxfordshire Partnership, local energy planning, and the Students Mission Zero. And that's it. That's all I had to say. The end. Sorry that. That's made us very.
Say there'd be an opportunity for questions.
Yes, I'm quite happy to take questions.
So,
anybody?
Questions from anyone? Yeah, go for it.
Well, one of my questions was, for example, thinking about Paleolithic records of temperatures. And I know, for example, with paleoseismology or paleogeology and all these other paleosciences, it's involved by many renowned people would say that it's largely on speculation because of course you have things like natural landslides, tectonic shifts, and so when you get a sample or whatever to say, as you said, check the temperature at a certain time, you could argue it's not an exact science. And so I would say what makes people who are concerned about the climate change issue who say that, well, we have these historic records that date very far away, we can correlate to today's records. How accurate can you say can you make that statement be?
They are accurate enough. They're actually very accurate records. Certainly recent. Most of the history we're interested in is quite recent in geological terms. There's very little tectonic shift in a million years. Tectonic shift is tens of millions of years. So you're not essentially the glaciation deglaciation cycles start when the continents reach their current configuration with most of the land mass in the northern hemisphere, because it's actually the fact that absorbs more energy when it's pointing at the sun, and these are Milankovitch cycles. Essentially, if I were you, I would worry less about the accuracy and more about the meaning. I know that there are lots of very clever people out there who spend their time making arguments that you need to know quite a lot of science before you can knock them down and say, oh, you don't believe it. I'm afraid it's true. What I've told you is probably the nearest reference to the truth you will get, given obviously the caveats around the limited capacity of my entire brain, but yeah, the truth is probably there. It's probably a lot closer than someone you'll see on YouTube saying, oh, this is nonsense. Unfortunately, it's true. And that is, I set out 7 or 8 years ago. I've been following this since, I remember when Margaret Thatcher spoke about it in '89, and my dad and I said, oh good, it's going to be fixed. But I've been following that, and I really went into it. I really said, okay, let's try and make sure that this isn't over exaggerated. And actually, the more I read, the worse it looks. And we have a real problem, and we need to solve it.
So what actions as individuals would we take? I look at the low traffic neighbourhoods in Oxford and keep hearing people complaining about traffic filters and they won't be able to get from A to B. How do we, what things are the right things for us to be doing, and how do we take everybody with us? Because people here, or most of the people here, are believing the science, but it's knowing what step to do now that can make us better and make a difference.
So I would guess that most of the people in this room have probably done most of the things that you can easily do, living in this society.
Yes, it's the societal change, isn't it?
And that's the only thing that the way you get societal change. I'm not an expert on societal change, to be honest, but the way is changing individuals' minds. It's voting. It's making sure that you make a noise about stuff, that you challenge this, that you talk about it. Because actually, when I talk to people on the doorstep, not many people mention climate change. When you ask about it, they say, "Oh yeah, I'm really worried about that." It's the elephant in the corner, because nobody knows how to deal with it. And the answers are pretty clear. It's travel less.
Yes.
Travel more by public transport. Yes, heating, transport, food. Cut down the amount of meat you eat is probably the single biggest thing you can do is switch right away from pork and lamb. From beef and lamb into pork and chicken. A next step is just eat less meat, all of which is good for your health, of course.
Yes.
And then it's about insulating your house, switching when you can to electrical heating. That's really quite nice now. Switching to electricity is becoming increasingly, if you want one bullet, it's that, because of course by 2035 electricity will be zero carbon.
Yeah.
So there is something about if we sat here in this building with the lights on, our carbon emissions would go down without us doing anything, because the grid is going to decarbonise. Indeed, Chris Stark from the Climate Change, who was chair of the chief executive of the Climate Change Committee, said at a conference what large organisations should do. Forget about fitting solar panels. That's pretty much done. He actually said get EVs, buy new EVs now, because in 3 years' time, or get them in your fleet, because in 3 years' time they'll come onto the second-hand market at exactly the time we need the numbers of cheap EVs to grow.
Yeah.
So it's things that you can do to make that go faster.
Sorry, there was
And there was a chap at the back.
Yes,
Yes.
go for it.
What gives you hope?
Human beings are incredibly inventive. Actually, the British have really invented it. Do you know that Trinity College, Cambridge has more Nobel Prizes than France? It always gives me enormous pleasure that. It's really nice to get one over on the French, isn't it? But the human beings are incredibly, and we are really, really good when we're up against it. And it's only the fact that actually that there is a lot of mogadon out there, intellectual mogadon out there, damping us down, that makes us not, that stops the transition happening even faster. Because actually, every now and then, there was recently 3 people just got let off by a jury, didn't they, for damaging the petrol station. Because actually, every time you get 12 good people and true in a room and you're able to tell them the truth about climate change, they say, yes, smash up the oil company. So actually, the problem is, Extinction Rebellion were right to tell the truth, act now, and actually getting the truth out there. That's why I'm here, because I think I need to talk about this more. I need to get out and talk because if everybody knew the truth, then the pressure to get this sorted would be enormous. There are just some very powerful people with lots of money who own most of the media who don't want you, who don't want their profit streams disturbed. And there are people who will happily pump oil until there is no one left alive to buy it. In psychiatry, we call those people psychopaths. Yes.
Oh, God.
Sorry.
You were saying about having children, and I'm wondering what you feel the key things are that we should be teaching our children things for the future that they're likely to have.
What was it Niels Bohr said? Prediction is really difficult, particularly if it's about the future. And the problem is that all of these things I've said, there are risks and error bars and sorts, and it's really difficult to think about the future that my children will have, because I don't know what it is. Should I be teaching them to hunt small mammals? Or should I be teaching them subsistence farming? Or should I be teaching them to defend themselves with guns and swords or whatever? Yeah, the number of trajectories you follow, I think you probably teach them to think divergently, teach them not to follow the crowd, teach them to be creative, teach them how to mend things. Those are many useful skills, in fact, that actually our grandparents would have taken for granted. And my worry is that what we've actually done over three generations is completely de-skill ourselves. I now sew and mend my own clothes because I think it's a good idea to learn it. But my mum and dad would have done it without